Welcome back for another installment of Fellowship of the Rink, episode 15. With me, as always, Joe Smith of The Athletic, bringing you all the insider info on your Minnesota Wild and Gophers hockey. And I guess, Joe, I don't know. I thought for a minute maybe you were going to convert to basketball with how well they've been doing and seeing you out there at the game. And then you told me that maybe you're not welcome back. I don't know.
Yeah, I went to go help out my colleagues for games 1 and 2 of the conference final with the Wolves fever that's hit up the whole Twin Cities here. 2 very excellent games down to the wire. But yeah, they're 0 and 2, me covering playoff games for them. So I'm not sure if my credentials still work for game 5, if there is one. But yeah, I love basketball. I don't know about you, and playoffs especially. You start to see them actually play defense, and especially like the crunch time moments. Like you like to see the big players come up in the top stage, and what you're seeing right now, Irving and those guys are just no matter what you do, you can't stop them.
Yeah, admittedly, I'm really not a big basketball guy, but all I know is that Dallas Mavericks have Kyrie Irving. They've got Luka Doncic, who's like otherworldly. And then everyone keeps on saying that it's Mark Cuban's team, even though it's not his team anymore. That's all I've got for insight.
Yeah. you carried it right there. Yeah. So, but yeah, it's, for Minnesota sports fans have had their highs and lows over the years. This is another one of those that they feel like they're getting that coming of age moment where they beat the Nuggets in that game. You feel like that's the kind of starting where, Anthony Edwards is the next coming, and he is going to be one of the new faces of the NBA. But maybe they do need to lose a little more before they can win. I think it was brought up to them.
The God's still one of the best post-game pressers ever. All right, today going to get through some brief hockey notes: IIHF World, Stanley Cup Playoffs, PWHL, which wowza. We've got a great interview teed up for you here with Ray Ferraro of ESPN, and then wrapping up as always with the Keyboard Warriors segment brought to you by our good friends at Barrel Theory. Joe, the way everyone predicted it, Czechia over Switzerland. That's, chalk.
That was, I don't know what the odds were going in the tournament, but there's always should be somebody who puts the betting odds on the host country. I think there's got to be somebody that takes a long shot bid on that. They have some really good players for Czechia. Pasternak scored the winner. Andre Palat, who I covered for 100 years in Tampa. Like, they have a really good group of players, but it is cool to see the celebrations in the subway and like the kind of the streets and like the square there and like how big of a deal it is to win. But yeah, no, I think a lot of us thought there might be a preview of Olympics in future years with USA versus Canada, or even Sweden made a little bit of a run there. But yeah, I think it's good for the sport to see that when you have a team like Czechia get in there and win the tournament and have the biggest star score the biggest goal.
Yes, that always helps. And of course, having Jaromir Jagr there doesn't hurt anything. When we talk about the Minnesota Wild players that participated, what weight do you put into any of these games? Like whether a player looks great or looks horrible, like is it something that's just kind of like a little like sub note, or is it something that you put a little bit more into?
I don't think you put like a ton of weight, but it's not meaningless either. Like in a sense where I've talked to players before, even when they're like younger in their careers, like Brodin Point, and he said like having those world championships was a huge springboard for them going into the next season, or like a confidence building thing, or just especially if like you win. Like I know US didn't win, so like per se Matt Boldy didn't come back with a championship or a medal. But we had in our athletic story by Mike Russo, Bill Guerin talking about how impressed he was with the way Boldy played in that tournament, and obviously the points were there, but it wasn't just that; it was his play away from the puck too. And so I guess, in a sense, it's not going to make over a guy's game, but building that confidence going the next season, getting that more international experience versus what they'd be doing right now, which would be playing golf or doing whatever. And you have guys that had down seasons, right? Like Marcus Johansson had a pretty good tournament for Sweden. Gustavsson looked pretty solid in net and helped get them a bronze medal for Team Sweden. Marco Rossi continued to build off of a very strong rookie year and led Austria to some really magical moments there. So in a sense that it's not going to change the world, but I think it is also should be noted that when players go over there and have a positive experience, they can lead into the next year and just add some more of that experience to their belt.
Yeah, Marcus Johansson, first liner next year. Book it.
Top 6, put him in.
Hey,
bring him up.
What have we learned about him? Contract
year.
Yeah. So we'll see. God, if Bill Guerin watches him have another like big contract year and gives him an extension, I think that might finally be when Twitter implodes.
They're not going to get there yet, and I don't think he's going to be guaranteed that top 6 spot from what I've been told. So I think that certainly getting that big of a boost in the tournament. I mean, he's a veteran player; he doesn't need to be totally as good or show how to score. But there's no doubt that having a better year from him is going to be so important for the Wild next year. The guys that had down years, the Freddie Goodrows, him getting healthy, and Johansson, and then Gustavsson, if he is indeed with the Wild in that tandem, getting him right to look like the weird previous year's version would go a long way for a team that needs a lot of things to go right to compete in this Western Conference, as we see in the playoffs right now, how good it is.
Yeah, that is a fact. And getting into the Stanley Cup playoffs here, it's been interesting, to say the least. Great competitive hockey all around. I want to lead in with you, though, talking about the New York Rangers, and particularly a guy who has been more or less the hero for them. I guess there's 2 guys. But we're going to lead with a guy you're very familiar with from the deep runs with Tampa, Barclay Goodrow, who got signed for this reason, right? This is a guy that's supposed to perform in the playoffs. I don't think anyone saw this coming.
I don't think they saw 6 goals coming, no, including an overtime winner. And he's had some of those big goals in the Tampa runs that I remember. That line was such a catalyst for them. The Gord, Coleman, Goodrow line, shutdown line. I remember a few series clinchers where Goodrow would just have the puck in the offensive zone. It's a 5-on-6 situation, just ending the game, just like the closer kind of thing for a defensive kind of forward, just blocking shots. He's got from a Shea Weber shot before that one cup win 2 against Montreal. He's an ultimate kind of gamer and playoff type player. And I know he might have gotten some flack because of the contract that he got, even though it's not a huge contract. It's still a sizable contract for a 3rd, 4th liner. But this is kind of where he makes his hay and where he's known for. And I guarantee he's one of the guys that John Cooper with Tampa misses the most of those guys that had to depart because of the salary cap and everything else. So when you have the young talent there and you have the stars, maybe they aren't producing in this series, like the top players, Panarins, whatever like that, you have your depth guys like him coming through and taking the pressure off by scoring these big time goals. That's just going to add to kind of the ability of this team to go on a deeper run that they think they can do.
And quite the opposite. First overall pick, big expectations, especially when we see how well first overall picks have been performing of late. And game 1, anti-hero, I guess you'd say, with an unfortunate bounce there. Alexis Lafreniere has looked the part. He has really stepped up since that. He's looked every bit the top pick. Is this just it? Has he arrived and he's here and comfortable now under a new coach, or where's the switch get flipped?
Well, it's hard to say. He's obviously just arrived for sure, but I think he's showing signs of it, and he showed signs of this before during the regular season as well. It's just hard when you have that label as a number 1 top 3 picks to live up to it, right? And you have the number 1 picks over previous years, the McDavids and the Matthews and everything else that are bona fide superstars. So I think it's taken him a while under another coach to figure out what makes him successful at this level and his role and how he mixes in with the other top talent that they have in the top 6 there with the Rangers. But that goal, that's a world-class game off the rush, and he kind of came in and the angle we saw in the replays was terrific, just how he went from one to the other and put it past Bobrovsky. So I don't know. it's just kind of an example of having patience for your top picks and your prospects like that, especially the ones that are that highly touted, knowing that they didn't forget how to play. They just need to kind of adjust to a different level coming from junior. So it's a big boon for the Rangers going forward if they have him playing like he's capable of, having made all these moves in the last couple of years, the Trocheck and getting Panarin in free agency and like adding around him. To have a homegrown guy like that deliver would mean so much.
Yeah, that is a fact. And we're going to table the topic that I'm sure everyone wants to hear about, being Jacob Trouba. We give it plenty of color in both the interview with Ray Ferraro and in Keyboard Warriors. So stay tuned. Dallas. I know one of your colleagues dropped an article here recently that maybe will calm the minds of some Minnesota Wild fans who have begged for a long time. And hey, hand up, like I've kind of sat back and longed for it too. A total teardown and actually building from the foundation up. Why don't you just fill everyone in on what they had to share?
Yeah, like a colleague, Mark Lazarus of The Athletic, wrote a story kind of looking back at a pivotal point with the Dallas Stars in 2016-17, where they're kind of in that danger of being in the mushy middle, right? And they went from like first in the division to sixth in the conference, and Jim Nill, the general manager, was worried. He's like, "What? Where are we going to go as a team?" Like, and he had a meeting with the owner and management group. Is like, we have a couple of choices here. You can tank, or we can change some strategy. And they're in a different non-traditional market compared to other places. And I think Minnesota is not an untraditional market. It's a very traditional market, right? So it's a little different there. But he just felt like financially, as a franchise, they couldn't afford to tank and go through 3 years of being bad hockey and not having fans there. Like the Blackhawks can still sell out, even though they're perfectly bad, but some markets can sustain that. And so they decided to shift their draft strategy from size to skill. And obviously hindsight's 2020. And when you hit on picks, you look like the genius of the world. But aside from Heiskanen, who was number 3 overall pick, a lot of their hits, the Stankovens and Wyatt Johnston's, like, weren't top 10 picks, you know. They got Ottinger. They hit
Hintz, all of them.
Heinz. Yeah, like, you know, it just goes to show, like, you don't have to have the top pick to hit in these drafts. And like Minnesota Wild's at number 13. Does that mean they're going to get a superstar at number 13? We don't know, or number 18, wherever they end up at. But I think that it shows that you can hit in those later rounds, and that's where you can build these contending teams, because you can only afford so much in free agency and only afford so much with the salary cap and building around Kaprizov. So maybe the Wild fans or Wild management says, hey, that's Riley Heidt that they got in the second round pick. Maybe that is the year off they got with one of the 2 first round picks. Maybe that is, you know, Ohgren they got, or maybe they, you know, they can get guys that are examples of players that they took not in the top 10, like a Marco Rossi, for example, or a Matt Boldy. But that's where you, as a team in the modern NHL, have to kind of have success, is by hitting on your own draft picks that are on entry-level deals for cheaper contracts early on, when you're still having that guys in free agency. The Kaprizovs are making $12 million a year. You need those guys that are younger and cheaper to make an impact, because you can't afford to pay everybody $7 million a year unless you're the Leafs.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I mean, the irony that the one top 10 pick of recent memory being Marco Rossi, and he's the one that they're talking about shipping out, right? Like, you just don't know how these guys are going to pan out, regardless of the pedigree. You can do all the scouting. We can look at all these mock drafts, and there's still a long road ahead to figure out who these players are going to be. And that's why it's interesting. Like, you look at the list Craig Button put out recently for his like top 10 and his mock, and him kind of caveating it with, hey, this is where I think they're going to be in 5 years, versus, hey, here is how good this player is today. And I think that NHL teams view it that way, but I don't think the public often like steps back and looks and says, oh yeah, right. Like, they're actually going to further develop or not develop. Weird.
Well, like in other sports, you have them drafted and they go right in the lineup, right? So you're drafting more for need, right? You're drafting, I would even at a defenseman, I'll get this guy, or let's say, you know, shooting guard or something in an NBA or whatever. Or if you're NFL, I need a left tackle, I'll get one in the top 10 and he's going to be in our lineup next year. Like, that's not always the case with hockey. And so that's why the case for making the best player available versus drafting for need when you don't know what your need will be in a year or two. You don't know how these guys are going to develop in the AHL. You don't know what trades you might make in between now and the next draft that will get you another player at that particular prospect position. So it is a different way of drafting unless you get the top picks that are like the Matthews and franchise changing guys that are automatically going to go in your lineup. It shows why you can maybe take a swing for a higher upside, knowing that upside can come in 2 or 3 years when we'd absolutely need it.
And speaking of franchise changing guys, on the other side of the aisle, we see the Edmonton Oilers. I mean, again, riding the top talent as they usually do. They look a little bit different. I'll give them credit that like they seem to have learned from some of the runs they've made in recent years. But the one thing that has always been and continues to be true, I don't think there is a bigger gamer come playoff time, maybe even in the league, than Leon Draisaitl. And this is a guy who's looking to make a big payday a year from now. A lot of people kind of expecting that maybe that's not in Edmonton. How much are you willing to give a guy like this and invest in him if you can bring in that next cornerstone guy to play alongside a Kirill Kaprizov? Now that we're not going to have the cap penalties anymore, it's perfect timing.
Yeah. Well, you got to convince him that Minnesota is the place he needs to be. But yeah, they'll have money to spend, and like there'll be a lot of teams that in theory will have money to spend. But he reminds me of having those closers in basketball, right? Like the Irvings and them. Like they make their money in the playoffs, what they do in the postseason, and that's where their legacies are formed. And I think that's why McDavid could be one of the best players of all time, but it still means a lot. It would mean a lot more to him to get that Stanley Cup. And so I think people in the NHL, I'm sure, are probably secretly hoping they can get a McDavid in a final, not just from marketability standpoint, but have one of the best players that will be in history to have that chance that many before him have had, whether it's the Yzermans or the Ovechkins or whoever else who were one of the top players that finally got a chance to, like, after knocking on the door, to get there. But Draisaitl will have a pick of wherever he wants to go. And, you wonder how the playoffs this year will determine that, right? Well, like, if they go to the final, if they win, or if they fall short again in the conference final, like, do they realize, like, him and McDavid as a group, maybe this isn't a sustainable model for us, or do we keep on kicking it, right? So that's the hard decision you have to make as a management group or as players. Like, I think it's hard for me as a player to, like, not want to play with McDavid or be on the same team with McDavid, but you also got to know that you have only so many chances in your career. He's getting a little bit older now to play for that cup, and whatever might give him a better chance to do it would probably be at that stage in his career. He's not going to be looking for necessarily the biggest money, although he'll want to get paid. He'll want to look at a chance to win a Stanley Cup.
Yeah. And I mean, everyone looks at McDavid and it's like, oh, how hasn't he been there yet? Like, sure, Crosby got there quick. Taves and Kane got there quick. People forget Ovechkin took 13 years to get to the cup final. And like, it's not a one-person thing. Yes. Are there moments you can point at where you can say whether or not your guy delivered? Sure. But like, hockey is the most team game out there. You can't just look at McDavid and be like, oh, how come he hasn't made it? What's he doing wrong? That's just crazy to me. I don't know.
Yeah. We said that with Steve Yzerman in Detroit, and people wanted him traded. They didn't think he could win with him, right? And he's one of the better captains of all time, right? Or iconic captains of all time. Steven Stamkos took 12 years to win a Stanley Cup after being drafted in 2008. They went to Cup Finals between then and then, but that's not the way everyone wants to go. No one wants to wait a decade for that experience, but it's a hard decision to make as a management group, of when to punt and when to keep on fighting with it, which is, like we joked earlier about the Leafs, but that's the decision that they've had to make over time. Is this model sustainable? Are these core players guys you can win with? And then, delighting, people wonder, could they win with Kucherov as their best player? And they end up absolutely able to do that, so time will tell on those things, but those make those decisions a lot more difficult, knowing that none of these examples are always just transferable. They're not always apples to apples, but it does give you an idea of how hard it is.
For sure. Going to the PWHL, Game 4, Sunday night, Team Minnesota, gloves, all equipment thrown across the ice, win the championship until they don't. Review, extensive review, and goaltender interference is called. within a minute or so, Boston scores. We've got a game 5 coming tonight as the episode drops Tuesday. Winner takes all. Joe, I mean, what did you think? We said after game 1, I said after game 1, hey, maybe this is going to be a high-scoring series since it's a 4-3 game. Mm-hmm. It's been quite the opposite ever since, and we just saw a double overtime game that took, to the very end of that second overtime to finally get the first counted goal. What do you think about the series, and what do you think about the controversial call?
Isn't that the most Minnesota sports thing ever, though? It's like have like cup being won on the ice and not awarded yet, and then taken away, and then have to go play game 5. And you saw the images from Bally's of like Taylor Heisey's face and her hands on her cheek, and you felt bad for that team because that emotionally got a gut punch that has to be. You go from that, you already let everything go and everything fly, and you think you won, and then have to go back and get back and play a game there. So I think that it was a right call, the goalie interference. Like, as much as I hate goalie interference and think it's incredibly vague and in the NHL, and there's been many calls where I've disagreed with in important times, I think that was the right call. It just happened, the fact that the momentum swing that it had, where you thought you'd won the championship and had to get back out and settle down and play again, and then you feel bad for anybody in that situation, the goalies included, to come back in and play. But I think he'll be determining how they mentally and emotionally bounce back from that. Ken Klee and his staff, and Ellie Darowitz, who's been through a million things in her career, to see if they can settle them down, because they've been playing really well in this series, and they thought they had a chance to win earlier in that game too. And so they have a good chance of winning game 5. It's just a matter of like if they can mentally get over that and get back to playing what they were doing before, because it was working.
Yeah, and they get the full reset, right? Like, in game, like, speaking for myself, no chance I'd be able to put my equipment back on and go out there and like give what I had been giving all game. Like, that's so deflating. But now you've got a chance to reset. You're hitting the road, going to Boston, and it is going to be really interesting to see what team we see. They're either going to come out and just torch the earth, or we're going to see early on, like, man, that way that everything unfolded ended up being the dagger. And online, you saw a lot of people who weren't even as upset about the call necessarily as they were about the inconsistency. Like, other similar scenarios happening that game, this series, that have been left alone. And then, lo and behold, in this moment, this is when they decide to call it. You know what? It sucks. We can debate it 50 different ways. It's done. We're on to game 5. Hopefully the team can think about it the same way, reset, go in, and get the job done. I don't know.
What a great success story this whole league has been this year, though. You think about it, they had 13,000 plus at the game last night, which I know the Wolves were on the road, but it still coincided with the game time for Timberwolves. And Friday night, they went head-to-head in town with the Twins and the Timberwolves, and they had 9,000, 10,000 fans at the X to watch that. Not just in Minnesota, but the whole entire league, to have this type of response fan-wise, and to have this much of a very good product, right? A very compelling, intense. The play on the ice has lived up to the hype, and to have a game winner take all, game 5 for the first Welter Cup, like, that's got to be a dream come true in 2 really good markets in Minnesota and Boston. It has to be a dream come true for the founders of this league, and give it a really great little momentum going into next year.
Yeah, and I love too what they were doing with showing the whole game streamed live on the PWHL YouTube page. That's the only way I could watch, because Xfinity and Bally both suck. And there was like at least 40,000 people watching consistently for at least the stretch that I was on. So it is just a great testament, and it's just year 1. We don't have team names yet. Like, we haven't even fully established the brand after we've seen so many different women's leagues be, created, changed. Now that we've got this established, like, it's only growth from here, and it's going to be exciting to watch.
No, absolutely. I think there was, and somebody who knows a lot about women's hockey as well will be as our guest, Ray Ferraro, his wife, obviously a legend in that space. Enjoyed talking with Ray about a little bit of everything, NHL playoffs, Dean Evason stories from him back in the day, interviewing his son in intermission when he made his debut. So really good, great chatting with Ray, and a really fun interview here.
Let's kick it over. This interview with Ray Ferraro is brought to you by our friends at Waggle Golf. Waggle Golf believes what you wear on the course should reflect your individuality, who you are, where you're from, your hobbies, interests, and passions. All the stuff that makes you, well, you. That's why every design is inspired by the desire to create a piece of apparel that strikes a chord when you see it, that makes you say, wow, that was made for me. Because in a lot of ways, it was. Ready to get your waggle on? Go to getyourwaggleon.com. Throw in promo code SP10 at checkout to take 10% off your entire order. Joining the show today is a hockey analyst for ESPN and half of the Ray and Dregs podcast, although he might try and convince you that he's a little bit more than half. We got 53. Ray Ferraro. Thanks for jumping on, Ray.
53%, I think. Although I must say, Dregs does all the heavy lifting. He gets the guests. He's, I might suggest a few, but he's actually the facilitator. So I just kind of show up, which is really, really the strength of my ability, I think, is just keep showing up and you do it one day, piece by piece, but I'm not the creator. No, that's not, that doesn't work for me.
Show up and look pretty. You got it.
You got half of it right, Scott.
Perfect. Well, opening question that we ask everybody, just because of its obscurity, Minnesota Wild logo, a lot of controversy around it. First time you saw it, did you see trees? Did you see an animal? Did you see, we've been told UFO? What did you see the first time?
First time I saw the logo, I thought of forestry. Mm-hmm. I did think almost immediately, I wonder what the mascot's going to be. Is it going to be blowing air, or is it going to be nothingness? And so I got to be honest with you, I didn't really connect with the name when it came out, because I really, and really to this day, I really don't know what the connection of it all is. I get the Wild. I get it, but I'm I don't know. I'd like to have a fierce mascot, and I don't know that really is possible with that name, or, so that's kind of what I thought about. I'm not I like new names. I like different names. I don't mind that it's not a plural name, the Stars or the Kings or anything like that. I don't mind that at all. They got me with that one. But hell, I was on the Thrashers. What does it matter, right?
Well, and I mean, talking, you've been on a lot of teams that, quite frankly, don't exist today. There's a lot of controversy with the Carolina Hurricanes still using the great and iconic Hartford Whalers look. How do you feel about that personally?
First time I didn't like it because they had 4 years almost had a separation. It was like they didn't really acknowledge the Whalers part of their history. And I'm like, oh, well, and now they want to use the logo because everybody's figured out it's such a cool logo and it looks really good. And so I didn't like that. I get it from, look, it's a new owner. It's a new time. They want to use it. They want to connect a little bit to the heritage of the Whalers. Great. I get it. It's for finance too. Right. I mean, people buy the jerseys, the hats, they like them. They look good. Cool little side story about the Whaler logo though, is that when we were playing in Binghamton, which was the Whalers farm team at the time, they just flipped the logo on its side and the W became a B. Right. And so we always thought that we were a quarter turn away from the NHL. That was a good one. And it's a hell of a logo. It is, I think it's sharp. You just look at it and you're like, exactly what is there. You take a second look and you go, oh, there's the whale tail. There's the H. I don't know. I just thought it was a brilliant logo.
Well, you mentioned the Thrashers in the proud history there. I know you played there for a little bit. There's a bit of movement to get another franchise back in Atlanta, and I was just curious from your perspective, do you think it's worth making another run at that? Do you think it's a viable place where maybe done right, it could work, or do you think other teams coming into play that maybe that ship has sailed?
Well, Joe, I don't know the ownership groups. I understand they're really well funded, which at the beginning and the end of all of it is what ownership has to be, in particular in sports in 2024. The Thrashers were an afterthought for Turner Sports in 1999. The mid 90s when they were running up to starting the team. There was the Braves, there was the Hawks, and there's the hockey team. And so you can't, if it's just a schedule filler, it's not going to work anywhere. It just won't. You need to have money to finance the building, to finance the team, to finance the organizational costs that come with it, scouts, minor league teams, developmental programs. Sports are not getting to be smaller business, they're getting bigger business. What I understand though is the groups that are interested in Atlanta, that's not a problem. And so and the location, which is in a different spot, like getting into downtown Atlanta is not easy. It is a slog. And it becomes difficult to get 18,000 people in there 41 nights a year. So my understanding is the new area is, I know where it is. It's out off of the highway towards Alpharetta, and it's a really nice area. That's where the Braves are, and they've built 4 ballparks in Atlanta for the Braves, and so if the look, I think Phoenix can work too. They've never had an ownership that can make it work. They've not been funded to the point that it can make it work. They haven't been able to make a deal with local leaders to make an arena work in a place that works. In Atlanta, it seems like they're further down the road even than they were in Phoenix after 30 years.
Well, as you saw, our name of our podcast is Fellowship of the Rink, a playoff Lord of the Rings, and our fandom for that. I wasn't sure. Do you have like a nerd itch or fandom? I know like Goodrow had collecting comics and he was into this. Like, I don't know if you had anything like shows that you and Cammy watch that you do, or any of the movies that you guys are into.
We are polar opposites of movie tastes, and like, for example, like there was this I don't know, it was probably 20 years, a Western that I thought would be really cool to watch together called Deadwood. Cammy got about, 12 to 14 minutes into it when Swearingen went through his third little tirade, and she's like, yeah, I'm out on this one. And I thought it was awesome. She likes the Harry Potter stuff and all that. I can't figure that out. I went to Star Wars. I remember when it first came out, I spent half the first movie asking who are the good guys and who are the bad guys. Like I just couldn't. It's just not in my headspace. I just can't. I can't. I'm a history guy. I love real historical figures and stories. This past year, I got to see Hamilton on Broadway for the first time. Oh my gosh, what an amazing show. And look, I'm from Trail, BC. We don't have a lot of theater there. Certainly not when I was growing up. So all of this stuff is new and interesting to me. But my movie and reading tastes are more real life, like biography, history. So the fantasy stuff, I can never figure it out. I tried. I can't tell you how many times I tried reading The Hobbit, and I got like 6 pages in, and I'm like, I don't know what the hell's going on here. I got to get out of here.
Who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? Yeah, I'm big on Deadwood too. I'm totally with you on that.
Good show, eh?
You a big fan of Tombstone movie?
You know what? I never got to it. Should I?
You have to. That's one of my personal favorite movies, period. The way that Val Kilmer portrays Doc Holliday is legendary.
Right.
But Wyatt Earp, too, is just an iconic character.
Yeah, I would. That will go on my list, and a list that I will be, while I'm on the road, I will watch, because that's one Cammy will have no interest in, guaranteed.
Love it. Report back.
Yeah.
Well, what's in your wheelhouse is Stanley Cup playoffs, and you are on hand for the Panthers and the Rangers series, which 2 overtime games already through 3 games. And I know that the numbers look pretty lopsided as far as the shot attempts and everything, including in game 3. What's your take on this series so far? I mean, is it probably more even? I mean, the scoreboard looks even, obviously, but, I don't get be slanted in terms of like the shots attempts and shots on goal kind of thing. Where do you see this series? Like, probably going to go 6 or 7.
Well, it is. I would be stunned if it doesn't go the distance, to be honest with you. I didn't think there was very much difference between the two teams, even though they play very differently coming into the series. If anybody tells you they figured out this series after 3 games, they're not telling you the truth, because what is the difference? At this point, the difference is a deflection off the shaft of Alex Wenberg's stick. He scored 1 goal in 31 games since he came to the Rangers. And a puck hits him in front of the net and goes in, and now they move on. The first period yesterday was 2-2. The shot attempts were 30-10 for Florida. The third period, Florida comes back to tie. It scores 2 goals. The shot attempts were 41-10. Like, it's not even close at various parts in the game. But the one thing the Rangers have always been able to do, in particular this year, because that's really what we're talking about, is they can quick strike. Alexis Lafreniere scored 2 lightning bolt goals yesterday. Beautiful goals. Barclay Goodrow all of a sudden is having he's having the playoff week of his life. And he scored a couple of goals, a nice tip, and then a really good shorthanded goal. They've got nothing from Zibanejad, Panarin, and Kreider in this series. So I think if you're the Rangers, you go, look, our goalie's awesome. 3 of our big boys haven't scored or even really impacted the game at all, and we're ahead by 1 game. We're up 2-1. If you're the Panthers, you must keep thinking, we just have to continue to play as much as we can like the third period. Because if they do that, sheer force and volume is going to probably put you in a good position. Yesterday was a wild, fun game. But I can't tell you that I feel the Rangers are in the driver's seat and they're up 2-1. How could you think that? But would you say that Florida's in great shape? They're down 2-1. Yeah. Like they're not in great shape, yet they've played better for longer in the series. And that's why there are times where I love analytics, and there are times when I feel like the old Charlie Brown cartoon where Charlie Brown tells Lucy, just tell your statistics to shut up. Because at the end of the day, the Rangers are up 2-1. Have they earned it? Yes, because they're up 2-1. Could you look at anything and say that's how it should be? Probably not, but it doesn't matter. They've been resilient. Their goalie's been awesome, and they've got the big goal that the Panthers haven't been able to get.
Yeah. There have been very few non-goalies who received the kind of ovation in Madison Square Garden that at Rempe has received in his like maybe other skaters have had that kind of outpouring of even playing 7 minutes a night. Like, what do you make of him, his game, and the whole phenomenon this is kind of created there? Because obviously there's value in him as a player, or else he wouldn't be in the lineup for very important games in the season. But it feels like it's a very polarizing subject based upon kind of the hits that he's made, and then also the fact that he's kind of assumed that he has to fight every game.
Well, I don't know how long it's been since he's had a fight. Probably 20 games. Now, this is not because of Rempe, but when he's in the lineup, they're 22-3-1. So you're looking. So say you take Rempe out and put another fourth liner in, and he plays 7 minutes. His impact is minimal, right? Like a 7-minute player is not going to have a major impact on the game. Where Rempe gets himself into trouble is if he takes a penalty like he did yesterday. I think it was his second shift. He slammed Sam Reinhart into the boards, takes a penalty, it's in the net, and he ends up playing 4 minutes on the day. I don't know why it's polarizing, other than if you don't consider that fighting is part of the game, because he's in the lineup. He does the job that he's capable of doing. He's actually pretty effective when he cycles the puck. When he's got control of the puck, who's getting the puck away from him? Now, it might not lead to a scoring chance, but if you get that line out against the other team's second line and they have a shift down there, they're able to hold it. They're able to kill that shift. That's a benefit to your team. I've talked to Matt a few times. I'm telling you, he is a wonderful kid. He is really nice. He's really respectful of where he is. He's super in awe of being there. Like, he's having the time of his life. And I think if he were 6'1", people wouldn't even notice. But the guy's the biggest dude on the ice by a mile. Like, he was standing next to Ryan Lomberg, who's a tough customer. They were standing together at a face-off, and I was like, I actually commented, I'm look at the size difference between these two guys. Like, Lomberg's 5'11", he's almost a foot taller. It's amazing. I think they've won 2 in a row when he's in the lineup. There's no chance he's coming out for game 3. Why would you take him out?
Yeah, that's fair. And what do you have any tips for a guy like Jacob Trouba, who has this condition where anytime someone's within like 1 or 2 feet of him, his arms just immediately asphyx out? Like,
don't. Like, it's a penalty every time.
It's ridiculous.
He was probably fortunate that the contact was to Rodriguez's neck and not to his head, or that's 5 in a game. Like, it would have been a 2-second review. But he has the reason he does that is when he's beat, it's a last minute reaction, right? Like, he had a hit. There are times when he makes hits or attempts hits that aren't in that scenario. Like, he tried to hit Martin Necas in the first round. If he would have hit him, if he would have made contact on that hit, like, it was an instant suspension. You know, like, he launched himself into the hit. Most times it is a reaction late. And so, I mean, I can't believe the coaches haven't, and himself haven't looked at video and said, look, when he's there, I mean, your play is with your stick, because when your elbow comes out, first of all, it's a penalty. Secondly, they're looking for it now. You know, it's not the first time it's happened.
They should have been looking for it for a while now.
Okay, but you're allowed to do that, but you get a penalty. Like, you're allowed to, like, one of the dumbest phrases that I've heard in the last decade is, we're going to get that out of the game. It's not a hockey play. If it happens between when the puck hits the ice and the last horn goes, it's a hockey play. Might not be a good one, but it's a hockey play because it's in the game. It's not a baseball play.
Yeah.
It's not a movie. It's a hockey play. And so you can say, we want to get checking from behind out of the game. Think of how many things in society you want to get out of society. There's a penalty for it. In hockey, there's a penalty for it. In Trouba's case, he got a penalty yesterday. Had the review showed that his elbow had hit Rodriguez's head, the penalty would have been more severe. It would have been 5 in a game. And that would have been a pretty severe penalty in that context.
For sure. Now, to the other side of the conference finals, I'm not even going to get into what's a great series. I got to lead off here, and you'll probably know where I'm going with this right away. One of my favorite highlights that I've ever seen has something to do with a player named Patrick Stefan. And I believe you were on the wondering,
yes, I was.
Take us through that. Like, what was going through your mind as all of that unfolded?
Well, I had played with Patrick for a couple of years in Atlanta. And I mean, Patrick's, was unfairly drafted number 1. In that draft, basically, the Sedins were drafted behind him. And the way the deal worked, Vancouver was going to come out with both of them. And Patrick had been he's a big kid, had played pro in Long Beach the prior year. So the thought was he was ready to play. He was not even close to ready. An expansion franchise didn't take their time because there was a panic. Hey, we got to get our number one pick in there. And he's not the most forceful player. So when I see him go in, all that's kind of in my head. And it was such a soft play. When from 15 feet away, there's not a player in the NHL that can't shoot that puck into the net. Like, just shoot it into the net. So it frustrated me that he tried to go to his backhand and just touch it into the net. And the puck jumped over his stick, which can always happen, right? I would say if I did that again today, I probably wouldn't have been as harsh as I was. But here's the thing. There's all kinds of ink spilled in people's comments on what announcers say during a game. And I get it. We're doing that live, right? We don't get a time to think about it. We get so my emotion of that play, which also was a Oilers broadcast, that had he missed the net and the game ended, it would have been forgotten to history. Mm-hmm. However, as he tried to save the play, he ends up passing it, I think, to Jarrett Stoll. Like right on his tape. There's no time, right? Like, there's no time for it to go get the puck. It was right on his stick. And then boom, that puck's up the ice, and 2 passes later, Hemsky scores. And it's tied. Like, it was the most ridiculous set of circumstances that you could imagine. And the building exploded. And, I was like super excited. And all of that just came out. And I've seen Patty since then. And like, I would do it a different way. Put it that way. I would comment on that a different way. For every year, the anniversary of it comes out and somebody reposts it, and I always go, like I know what's coming, but yeah, it was still to this day one of the craziest things that you could see, because, as I said, he's 15 feet away. There's nobody around. Just shoot it in the net. But he didn't, and turned out to be a hell of a comeback. Although the other part is Dallas won in overtime anyway, so it didn't really matter. No one remembers that one, but yeah. No.
A guy both of you and I know well, Dean Evason. I think eventually he'll get another shot to be a head coach in this league. Obviously, well respected here in Minnesota. You go back with him. Do you have a favorite Dean Evason story?
Oh, I got a million. Got a million.
I know you probably have countless ones, but a favorite one you could share that fans would get a kick out of.
Well, okay, so when we were 20, he was with Washington at the time. I was with Hartford. We got sent down to the American Hockey League, and we shared a farm team in Binghamton. So like, just think that would never happen now. Everybody's got their own team. But so Dean and I lived together. We didn't really know each other, but we lived together in this apartment, furnished, $460 a month in Binghamton, New York. We didn't have a car, so we bought and if you don't know what it is, go look it up. It's an AMC Matador, which the guys on the team called the Bull because it was about a block long, and we paid $600 for it. And so if you think of that, we split $300 each on the car. The rent was $230 each a month, utilities included. And so we live our way to, together. We have all the fun and all the ups and downs that 20-year-olds can have. Like, nobody could cook. Dean did all the cooking. He'd be on the phone with his mom, and she'd be giving him the recipe to make like whatever, whatever. I didn't know how to cook. I'm from an Italian family. Whatever my mom did, how it got from the stove to the table was of no. It was out of my brain. It was just like, it was there and it was really great. And then all of a sudden we had to do it ourselves. So by the way, we go through the year, I get called up, Dean finishes the year in the minors, and we got this car. So he calls me. He's like, what do you want to do with the car? I'm like, I don't know. I don't want it. In the meantime of the year, the muffler had fallen off. We ripped the muffler off. So we're driving around with no muffler. It's like, it's a piece of junk. So Dean leaves. He leaves all of our stuff, like the pots and blankets and everything, in the trunk of the car, rolls the windows down, and puts the keys in the ignition and leaves. Right? Just goes back to Brandon, Manitoba. He gets a call from the police department like in June. So he left in like April. So he gets a call from June, and they say, hey, what are you doing with this car? He's like, well, I don't want it. He goes, well, it's still where you left it. No, this is how bad a car was. Nobody took it. The keys were in the ignition. There was gas in the tank. And so Dean said to the policeman, he's like, hey, do you want it? And the guy's like, yeah, I got a 16-year-old. Sure, I'll take it. So the guy sent him the papers. Dean signed them and sent them back with the keys. Oh, no, the guy had the keys, sent the papers back and gave the car away. But that's how 20-year-olds deal with a problem. We're like, here, you just passed it along. Look, I think Dean's an awesome coach. I think he's gotten better year by year by year. He's an amazing guy. I really enjoy being around him, and I know players really like playing for him. I'm surprised I haven't heard his name more this summer. I thought Winnipeg might be a good fit for him. I thought Jersey might be. I still think Seattle is a place, but I'm surprised that it's in a very competitive year hasn't sprung up yet.
Well, the Seattle Ron Francis thing makes a lot of sense too.
It does, but there's, it makes, to play the other side of the coin. If it was going to be Dean, wouldn't it be by now?
That's true.
Or does it have to be somebody that's still coaching somewhere? Like I don't know how those coaches searches work. But I do know, Todd McClellan's still out there. Jay Woodcroft is still out there. Dean's still out there. There's really quality, competent coaches to compete against. And that goes past that Travis Green's been hired and Sheldon Keefe was rehired and Craig Berube was hired. This was a loaded coaches class. And, man, it's competitive to get behind one of those 32 benches.
Yeah, it is. And we got just a couple more here. Ray, we're still okay on time?
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. So you've done a lot of really great things, both in your playing career and post-playing career and broadcast and, all the analyst work you've done. I got to imagine that the coolest is having the opportunity to interview your son at intermission.
Yeah, I mean, talk about a thing that came together by happenstance, by good fortune. Landon was with Detroit, and he was put on waivers and picked up by the Bruins. So the waiver period is really crazy because literally nobody knows what's going on. So I'm texting people that I know around the league that I think might hear, and everyone's like, no, that's not how it works. Nobody knows what's going on. So I know that the claim period is 12 o'clock the next day. When a player goes on waivers, they have 24 hours, and it's noon Eastern the next day. So I'm sitting there, phone rings, I see it's Landon, and I'm like, hey, what happened? And he goes, Boston. And I'm like, oh, are you kidding me? Amazing. Fantastic. He's like, I got to go. I got a call here. I got to get to Toronto. And I'm like, Toronto? And he goes, yeah, Bruins playing Toronto tomorrow. And I'm like, Landon, I'll see you there. I'm doing the game. And he's like, oh, awesome. I'll call you when I get in the car. So, because they had a driver take him from Detroit to Toronto. So he gets in the car. I tell Cammie, I can't believe it. I'm going to see Landon tomorrow. He's going to be with the Bruins. So I see him for 30 seconds in the morning because I know I've been to a new team. It's like your head's blowing up with information and trying to learn guys' names and who your line is. And so I see him in the morning. I'm like, hey, son, how you doing? He's like, great. And I'm like, okay, have a great game. I'll talk to you after. Love you. And so he went. So my producer, Chris Edwards, awesome producer at TSN, he doesn't tell me anything. I'm doing the period. The game's on. It's now the end of the first period. We do our regular intermission. Come back. I do the second period. There's like a minute left in the period. And he comes in my ear and says, Ray, you're going to interview Landon at the break. And I go, what are you talking about? And he's like, yeah, you're going to interview Landon. I go, no, I don't want to do that. And we had joked about this, Landon and I, for years, like as a dream it would be to, if this could happen. And he goes, yeah, too late. PR is going to tell him. So Landon's going down the runway, which is to the right. I'm between the benches. And I see the PR guy say to him, TSN. And Landon says, okay. And he points to me. And the look on his face must have matched the look on my face. Like, are you kidding me? Like, he doesn't really want to do the interview. I'm nervous as hell. Like, I don't want to screw it up. And so he comes over there and I'm like, hey. And he's like, yeah. I go, well, look at the camera up there. And all I could think of, like, I couldn't even think of how to start the interview. And I just said, well, something to the effect of, well, this is pretty odd. And like, like I'm interviewing my son. And it was so great. It was so much fun. And to watch him play in the NHL, to watch him realize his dream growing up, to be able to talk to him and like have a public record of it was, you're right. It was about the coolest thing. I look at it every once in a while, the best thing about our phones is we get those memories that pop up, on our phone. Mm-hmm. And that interview will pop up in the memories thing. And I look at it and I watch it again. And I just, it was the best. It was the best. I mean, he had an injury riddled career. He fought through more than he really needed to, complete reconstruction of his knee, surgeries on both groins, just a wrist problem. He just couldn't grab the traction he needed. But man, he fought and played pro hockey for 10 years and really, really proud of him.
You should be. And you're one of the maybe 1%, right? Of a parent who has a kid who plays in the NHL. And I've heard you give speeches before or interviews before about being a hockey parent. And there are lots of hockey parents in Minnesota. A lot of them had played before, had been coaches before, and think their kids are going to get to the next level. And I was curious from your experiences of what kind of advice would you give for parents of youth hockey players or kids now about that process and that dream and trying to manage that from a realistic, perspective? Well,
Joe, I would say the first thing is that there is probably nothing more emotionally connective with your children's upbringing than watching them play sports or watching them do the thing that they love, because you want so badly for them to be successful. And that's what they want. And you're willing to put money and time and your effort behind all of that. But at the end of the day, your contribution is to watch and support. It's not to coach. It's not to tell your son or daughter that their coach is no good or that their coach should do this. If you want to coach, coach. But your job is to support, because it is so difficult to advance. It's so difficult as you advance to get to the next spot, because now you're, the herd gets tighter as you advance. And if you think about it, if I come to your work and every time you make a mistake, I tell you about it, and I tell you about it with emotion and firmness, how does that make you do your job better? All it does is make you more fearful of making another mistake. That's why it's support. He or she does not need you to break down every play. Mm-hmm. I had this amazing dad. My dad was he was the best. And we'd get in the car, his work truck, in trail. I'd come out, I'd throw my bag over the truck, into the back. Half of the time it was full of snow. And I'd just flip it in the back, throw my stick back there, I'd get in the truck. And we'd start driving home. He never said a word. Nothing. Didn't say good game, bad game, nothing. We'd drive, and it would usually take me to the first stoplight, which was probably a couple of 100 yards. And I'd say, what do you think? Because I wanted his opinion. And he'd say, oh, geez, that was a good game today. Or, oh, you didn't really have your legs today. And, oh, I like this. But it was always something really quick and really short that allowed me to talk about the game to him, to flesh it out. And then he would give me a little tidbit back. Look, he never skated a day in his life, but he watched me skate every stride from the time I was 5 until I was 18. So he knew what my game was about. So to the parents, I would say, as much as you understand your child's game, you probably need to take a half a step back and think about support as opposed to coach. And I'll give you one quick story. We have a now 17-year-old, Cammy and I, who's turning out to be quite a talented soccer player. Now, Cammy and I think we know sports, but we don't know the ins and outs of soccer. So at the time, he's about 10, 11, and they're in a tournament. And soccer is different than hockey. People don't yell and scream from the sidelines as much. So they're ahead 1-0. I'm standing in the right corner. It's late in the game. He's a forward. He plays on the front line. And the ball comes in the corner. And for whatever reason, I yell at him, Riley, hunt it. I don't even know what that means. But anyway, and so he doesn't look at me. He doesn't hunt the ball. He just kind of does his thing. And the game goes on. Turns out they win. So we're in the car on the way home. And he says, Dad, I heard you yell, hunt it to me. But if I run at the ball there and I don't get there, they pass it into the middle and then they pass it up to the far side and they've got a free run up the other side of the field. My job's to keep the ball contained. And I said, you know what, Riley, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to watch your games and keep my mouth shut, because it was such an amazing lesson of half the time the parents are giving advice and they're wrong. The game that they played as kids is not the game of today. So the advice they're giving their kids is not, in a lot of cases, correct. And even if it is, just sit there and support. Give them a tidbit that maybe they can catch and grow on. But man, telling them what they do wrong all the time, pushing them and shoving them. If they want to do the work, they'll do the work. Just because you spend money on them doesn't mean they need to get better. They're going to try to get better. But if you spend money, that means you've given them support. Back up. Let them do their thing. It's their job. It's their journey. It's not yours.
That's awesome.
Very well said. Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll wrap on this one, Ray. I'm not sure. Big golfer?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, this one will be perfect for you. This one is for our friends at Waggle Golf. This is our Waggle Golf dream foursome question. Everyone go to getyourwaggleon.com, promo code SP10 to take 10% off. So Ray, we're talking dead or alive. It can be one of your favorite characters from Deadwood for all I care. If you're telling your dream golf foursome, who are the other 3 golfers that are going to be joining you?
Well, I want them to be good players, right? Like, I mean, back to Evason, I can never beat him anyway. He's too good. He's just too good. Geez, I wish I would have had a little advance on this. Let me think here. I would probably put Tiger Woods there because I was a big Tiger guy, and I mean I still kind of hope that he could cobble together 4 rounds somehow. But so I would say he would probably be in it. My favorite baseball player, the middle name of my oldest son is James. Jim Rice would be in it. I'm a huge Red Sox guy. I jumped on that bandwagon in 1975 when they were going to the World Series. I was 11, and I didn't realize it was going to take 30 years for them to win. Fourth one. You know what? I wish my dad was there. I miss my dad. It's been a long time. And man, you could put 4 amazing people together from all realms of different parts of life. But man, I'd like to spend 5 hours again. That would be great.
One heck of a cart ride through 18 holes, right? So that'd be one heck of a...
It really would. It really would. He still wouldn't let me drive the cart. He used to tell me. He started a concrete business in 1947, and as he was ill towards when he passed, he told my brothers, "Whatever you do, don't let Raymond touch anything that moves." And so he knew.
Fathers always know. They always have a way of knowing. So
they do. They do.
Well, thanks so much, Ray. I know you have a lot of work to do with the series here, but thanks for taking the time for us, and really enjoyed this chat. And we'll catch up soon.
Awesome. Enjoy the day, guys. Thanks for reaching out, and we'll talk again.
Man, Joe, this is one of those interviews where I wish that there was just like no time limit. We could have gone in every direction. We probably could have gotten 50 different Dean Evason stories. We could have talked to him about just everything from back in the glory days with, the Hartford Whalers, with the Atlanta Thrashers. Like, he's just an encyclopedia of stories, and just a treat to have someone like Ray Ferraro on.
Absolutely is. It's been awesome to get to know him over the years covering hockey, and always so eloquent in the broadcast. He breaks things down simply for everybody. And I appreciated too, like the advice for hockey parents, and hopefully people listen to that too, from his experience. And for us being parents ourselves, it's always something to take to heart too, of how you channel your passion and love for the sport that you played once, and then your kid wants to play it and just want them to enjoy it so much, but not pushing too much. So really enjoyed that chat with Ray.
Yes. And now we kick it over to our final segment. As always, Keyboard Warriors. Again, I know obviously the game tonight is in Boston. Everyone should get out to the Barrel Theory tap room. Check out whether it's their great list of beers that's available there on site. I actually just went in the other day and had their Chaz Michael's delightful beer. That's also included on their to-go list. So grab your beers to go, take them home for the game. Maybe you want to post up there and then go watch somewhere downtown, get the party on if they win, commiserate if they lose. But get out there, support our good friends at Barrel Theory Beer Co. Joe, we got 2 interesting ones here that I found on the interwebs, and it didn't take me long searching to get these. First one here, and I don't know how much context either of us can really provide here, but it's definitely at least one that warrants some discussion. We have Mike Commodore coming in after the announcement of Scott Arniel being the new head coach of the Winnipeg Jets. And Commodore comes in right away. Massive mistake by the Jets. Scott Arniel is a loser. He's been a loser his entire career. Got a chance years ago. His arrogance ruined everything. He's spent the last 14 years with his nose up assholes and his lips wrapped around balls. #loser. Very aggressive. But there were a lot of people that commented underneath Dreger's original post announcing this, being like, did they not do any digging into what happened in Columbus? Like, I don't know, Joe, were you surprised by the hire? Does this make sense? Do you have any context around just his last head coaching stint?
Yeah, obviously, although a lot of teams like to work from within and to promote that way, and obviously no one has a better feel for him, at least as of recent times, the Winnipeg Jets. With that, I was more surprised because of all the coaches that are out there right now. Not that you have to go back to a quote retread or whatever you want to call it, or recycle coaches, but there are some very good coaches out there, whether it's McClellan, I know Dean Evason. I think we got to look here in Winnipeg. There were other ones that were available beforehand, like the Sheldon Keefes and whatever. So this has to be something where either, Rick Bowness on his way out recommended, or the guys in the group and the players, like, how much the players played a part in previous changes in this organization. So you would have to think that there was some internal support for this hire to happen when you have all these outside candidates that are clearly either both available and strong at their own right. So I don't have as much context on the previous stint with Scott, so I don't want to speculate on everything like that. I know Mike comes out with some strong takes over the years. Some have been spot on, some have obviously not. So I take everything with a grain of salt there, but I do think that for this move to happen in an internal hire, especially when they're at such a kind of a crossroads there in Winnipeg, that they would want to make a very thorough decision, that they have to feel comfortable for what they know from the inside here to make this the right move.
Yeah, and I mean, working against Dean Evason, if there's anyone that Bowness was not going to endorse, it was him. It would have been so much fun. I personally probably would have abused the clip of Bowness just screaming at Evason, and Evason's just like, what?
Yeah.
You want to do something? Let's do this. So, no, but with you, Commodore always comes in hot. He has absolutely been spot on certain things. And, well, like you said, some things, maybe not so much. So take it for what it is, but everyone do your own digging as you wish. But Scott Arniel, still, regardless, head coach for the Winnipeg Jets, as long as he doesn't start asking players for their cell phones. Next one here, we've got, again, to further the discussion, Chris at Son O'Hedman, Mark Messier Leadership Award winner. And here we just see multiple instances represented with pictures of the chicken wing famed by Jacob Trouba. I want to know, would it play well or poorly for PR if someone like Buffalo Wild Wings went and grabbed him as someone to endorse their product and made fun of the chicken wing bit? I gotta imagine that would captivate some people, myself personally at least.
Well, I'm not sure he would buy into that very well, but I think there'd be
it's a lot of money
marketing campaign. And we talked, and Ray, I think on the interview kind of spot on with this analysis of it. It's just the why. Why do you need to feel like that's your first instinctive move to do that? I do like a lot of parts of Trouba's game. And I've had conversations with him. And I know my colleague Mike Russo did a great story about him and his off the ice interests and stuff. He's not a bad human being. I think he makes these bad decisions, and then now he's labeled with this on the ice, where you have these elbows or hits that you can play on the edge without going overboard. And this is when you deal with elbows to the head, you deal with people's health and long-term health. So I think, like Ray said, you can't just call something not a hockey play when it happens on the ice, because a lot of these plays are hockey plays or just bad hockey plays or illegal hockey plays. And so the instinct of where when someone's going by is to try to use your elbow, but you use your stick instead. So the $5,000 fine, I'm sure will hit him very hard.
Yeah, what was that quote from Paul Maurice? It was basically everyone pass the hats around. I'm sure this one's going to really hit hard.
I'm sure he won't be able to eat tonight thing, So yeah, that's a whole other story for $5,000. That's $1 for you and me or something like that. So it's just, but yeah, I think getting attention in all the wrong ways here, and I think there's, when you have that reputation, it's going to follow you, and so far it hasn't hurt him necessarily. It doesn't seem like you didn't get a major in this. It didn't get a major in this situation. So where's the deterrent going to happen? Yeah,
I think the league's at fault to an extent, because everyone's talking about it more now. This has been his track record for a while. He always throws the chicken wing when he needs to reach for a guy, and if you're not going to penalize it harder, at a certain point it becomes the league's fault and not Trouba's, because why would he stop doing what he's doing if no one's going to stop him? I don't know. But I'm with you. I definitely am an outspoken, in opposition of Jacob Trouba for the chicken wing specifically. The rest of his game, I think, is great. You would love to have a guy like Jacob Trouba, and the other one that I always compare him to is Tom Wilson. That's great hockey. You love the physical play. Get on the train tracks, you're going to regret it. But with Tom Wilson too, it's if you just stopped leaving your feet and literally targeting people's heads, I'd have no problem with your game. I wouldn't, if you're playing against my team, I'm certainly not going to like you, but it's just the unnecessary attempts at someone's head. And like, maybe I'm a little bit biased on that topic too, because I have, we'll just say, more concussions than normal people do. I just don't understand why you have to target the head when you could murder these people hitting them clean in the chest more often than not. That's my take.
Yeah, and you hate that that's a storyline for a series that's been such well played as this series has been. Exciting play on the ice, that this is going to be and should be a storyline because of the what ifs and could have been called, and will this be effect later in the series? You know, went through the same thing like Sidney Crosby hit on him a couple of years back in the playoffs, I think, too.
Yep.
So obviously enjoyed the series so far, but this is going to get some legs on it if this series goes longer and there's more issues or payback because of it.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to watch tonight and see how the game gets played as a result, whether it's the answer coming from Florida or does Trouba change his game at all or keep doing the same thing. It's going to be interesting to watch regardless. But again, thank you, as always, to our great friends at Barrel Theory. Go check them out. Joe, anything we want to promote that you, Russo, kicking out in the next week or so here on The Athletic?
Yeah, well, Russo wrote a story the other day talking to Guerin about the players in Team USA who made their case for that Four Nations Cup and Olympic spots, and Matt Boldy was featured in that one. My Iowa story on my deep dive on the development programs are going to run either Wednesday or Thursday of this week. As we get closer towards the draft, we'll have more, focus towards the draft and who they might get at that particular round in free agency. Get a little closer to that time, we'll have more of those kind of stories. But it's been kind of a little bit quiet on the news front for them. I think they'll be starting a little more up in the next few weeks or leading into late June. So we'll have more of that stuff for you as we go along. So, but yeah, that's it for us right now, I think. And then we'll always check the Twitter and follow us there, and we'll let you know what else might be coming out soon. I do have a fun story coming out that's non-Wild related. It's a 20-year anniversary look back of the Vinny Lecavalier, Joe McGinley fight in the 2004 Cup final. Definitely one of the more iconic fights in Stanley Cup final in recent memory that I can think of. Two guys of that stature going head to toe, and it obviously led to a 7-game series and a victory by the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Yeah, that is going to be an interesting one, man. It'd be great to get both of them like in some setting for an interview just to talk through the series and mostly that fight. But awesome. Well, everyone, appreciate you tuning in as always. Wherever you listen, make sure you're subscribed. Check us out on YouTube and be watching. We've got a couple other interviews already banked, a couple more in the works here leading up to the NHL draft. And of course, tune in on YouTube regularly if you want to see more and more prospect content popping out before the 2024 NHL draft. But as always, we really appreciate each of you for tuning in. Hopefully you'll stick along with us through the summer. And hey, hopefully we see Joe next week. But if not, it just means he's off doing bigger and better things, guys. But yeah, we will talk to you soon. Stay classy. Stay to hockey.